The bullet was already in the air when Callum Weston made his choice. One heartbeat. That was all it took for a janitor nobody noticed to become the man who changed everything. In the marble silence of the Hartwell Industries boardroom, blood pooled like spilled secrets across the pristine white floor. And Vivian Hartwell, the most powerful woman in the building, was about to learn a truth that would shatter her empire. The man who saved her life was the husband of the woman her company killed. This is their story. The morning started like every other morning at Hartwell Industries. Pristine, perfect, brutally efficient. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows on the 43rd floor, casting geometric shadows across Italian marble that cost more than most people earned in a decade. The building stood like a glass cathedral in the heart of the city, a monument to American capitalism, where power wore expensive suits and mercy was a line item nobody could afford. Callum Weston arrived at 5:47 in the morning, just like he had every single day for the past 3 years. He swiped his worn ID badge at the service entrance, the kind of entrance that important people never used, the one tucked behind the loading docks where workers like him entered to keep the machine running. The security guard, a good man named Marcus, with 4 kids and a mortgage that kept him working double shifts, nodded without really seeing him. That was fine with Callum. Being unseen was the point. At 42 years old, his hands were calloused from years of work that should have been beneath his skills. His shoulders had developed a slight stoop from pushing mop buckets and lifting garbage bags. His face carried lines that grief had carved too early, a widower's pain that lived in the spaces between words he never spoke. His locker in the basement was dented and scratched with the initials of janitors who had come before him, men who had also been forgotten. He opened it slowly, carefully, the way he did everything since Marisol died. Inside, taped to the metal door, was a photograph of his daughter, Rosie, 8 years old with her mother's dark curls and a smile that still carried hope despite everything. She was thinner now than in the photo. The chronic respiratory problems from environmental exposure had seen to that. But her eyes still sparkled with the resilience that kept Callum breathing when breathing felt impossible. He touched the photo gently with one calloused finger. For you, he thought. Everything I do is for you, and for your mother, for the truth she deserved. 3 years he had worked in this building. 3 years of patience. 3 years of purpose hidden behind a mop and a uniform nobody looked at twice. By 7:30, the 43rd floor gleamed. Callum had buffed the marble until it reflected the recessed lighting like still water. The boardroom smelled of lemon polish and filtered air, every surface pristine, every chair perfectly aligned around the massive oak table. 20 seats, each one worth more than his monthly rent. He was finishing the windows when they started arriving. First came Vincent Cross, Vice President of Operations, 63 years old with silver hair and cold gray eyes that never quite warmed, even when he smiled. He had run the manufacturing division for 2 decades, turning massive profits while the factories churned and burned. He dropped his leather briefcase at his usual seat without acknowledging the janitor 3 feet away. Then Barrett Sinclair, the chief financial officer. 62, impeccably dressed, with the kind of face that could argue anything with equal conviction. He had a reputation for making problems disappear, for turning catastrophes into line items that shareholders never questioned. Others filtered in. Corporate lawyers with watches that cost more than cars. Division heads with careful smiles.
Calm down.
Board
Just tell me
members
what
who
you
had built
want.
careers on
I
decisions
want
that
justice
destroyed lives
for
they would
someone
never
who is
see.
no longer here because of the
And then she
decisions
arrived.
made here.
Vivian Hartwell entered the boardroom like weather. Sudden, commanding, impossible to ignore. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost 3 months of Callum's salary. Her dark hair pulled back in a style that was both elegant and severe. At 34, she was the youngest CEO in the company's 60-year history, a woman who had inherited her father's empire and transformed it into something even more formidable. The board feared her. The shareholders worshipped her. The employees respected her from a careful distance. Callum had cleaned her office hundreds of times. He had emptied her trash, polished her desk, vacuumed around her designer heels. She had walked past him so many times he had lost count. She had never once looked at him. Not really. Their eyes met for maybe half a second as she entered, Her gaze passed over him the way it might pass over a chair or a lamp. Not cruel, just absent. He did not exist in her world. He nodded slightly and moved toward the door with his cleaning cart. Ladies and gentlemen, Vivian's voice cut through the preliminary chatter like a conductor's baton. Let us begin. We have a full agenda, and I do not intend to waste time. The door exploded inward, not metaphorically. The heavy oak door literally burst off its hinges with a sound like a cannon shot. Wood splintered, security glass shattered into 1,000 glittering fragments. The blast wave hit the room like a physical thing. Papers flew, chairs toppled, someone screamed. And through the smoke and chaos stepped a figure in black. The gunman wore a ski mask and dark clothes. He carried a weapon that looked both well-maintained and well-used. His movements were efficient, military-trained. This was not some desperate amateur. This was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Nobody move. His voice was rough, distorted by the mask. Hands on the table. Now, the boardroom erupted into chaos. Vincent Cross dove behind his chair. One of the lawyers grabbed his phone and was immediately rewarded with the gunman firing a shot into the ceiling. The crack was deafening in the enclosed space. Plaster rained down like snow. Phones down. The gunman swept his weapon across the room. Next one goes in someone's chest. Phones clattered onto the table. Hands went up. 20 of the most powerful people in the city suddenly looked very small. Vivian Hartwell did not run, did not scream. She stood frozen at the head of the table, her face pale but her eyes sharp, calculating. Even in terror, she was thinking, analyzing, looking for an angle. You. The gunman swung his weapon toward her. Vivian Hartwell, we need to talk about accountability. I do not know what you want, Vivian said, her voice remarkably steady. But this building has security that will respond any moment. Security I already handled. The gunman laughed, bitter and cold. I know this building better than you think. I know its rotations, its blind spots, its weaknesses. I know a lot of things, like how many safety violations you have buried, like how many lives you have crushed for profit margins. If you have a grievance, there are legal channels. Legal channels? The gunman's voice cracked with rage. You mean like the ones that ignored my wife? The ones that stamped too costly on the safety reports that could have saved her? The ones that paid off inspectors and buried complaints while people choked on poison? Callum, still pressed against the wall near the shattered door, felt his heart stop. The words, the pain in that voice, the specific accusations. This was not random. This was personal. This was about the factory, about Marisol. My wife died in your factory, the gunman continued, stepping closer to Vivian. His hand shook slightly. She died because you chose profit over people. Because board meetings like this one decided her safety equipment was too expensive. That proper ventilation would hurt quarterly earnings. Vincent Cross, still crouched behind his chair, whispered urgently to Barrett Sinclair. He is talking about Riverside, the explosion 5 years ago. Shut up, Vincent, Barrett hissed back. But the gunman heard. His weapon swung toward them. Oh, you remember? That is touching.
Look at me. Don't
You
close
remember
your
the
eyes.
43
Are you
people
still
you
listening
killed?
to me?
The families you
My
destroyed?
daughter. Please,
Tell me,
someone pick
do
her
you
up at
remember
3
their
o'clock.
names? Do you ever think about them when you are cashing your bonuses? Listen, Vivian said, taking a careful step forward. Her voice had shifted. Less authoritative, more human. I understand you are in pain. I understand you have lost someone. But this is not the way. You understand nothing. The gunman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You live in your glass tower making decisions that kill people you never see. People like my wife. People like me. We are just numbers to you, just costs to be managed. He raised the gun, pointing it directly at Vivian's chest. So let me make you understand. Let me make you a number. Time slowed. Callum saw the gunman's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the microscopic shift in his stance, saw the intention crystallize into action. Daniel Reyes was about to kill Vivian Hartwell, and Callum understood why. God help him, he understood completely. Daniel's wife Maria had died in the same explosion that took Marisol. Same shift, same section, same poisoned air. Callum had every reason to stand still, every reason to let the bullet fly. But Marisol's voice echoed in his memory, her last words before the machines went silent. Do not let them take your heart too. Raise our daughter with love, not hate. Callum made his choice. He did not think about it, did not calculate odds or weigh consequences. He just moved. 3 years of physical labor had kept him stronger than he looked. His reflexes, dulled by grief and routine, suddenly sharpened to crystal clarity. His body remembered what his mind had forgotten: how to move with purpose, with speed, with absolute commitment. He crossed the 12 feet between the wall and Vivian Hartwell in less than 2 seconds. The gun cracked. The sound was enormous, a physical thing that punched the air. And Callum's body, thrown forward by momentum and choice, intercepted the bullet meant for Vivian. The impact was fire and ice simultaneously. The 9mm round hit him high on the left shoulder, the force spinning him partially around. He felt it. The punch, the burning, the immediate wrongness of metal tearing through flesh and muscle. His legs buckled. The polished marble rushed up to meet him. He hit the floor hard, his head cracking against the stone he had buffed to perfection just an hour earlier. Blood began to pool beneath him, spreading across the marble like spilled paint. Dark, thick, obscenely red against the white stone. Through the ringing in his ears, Callum heard chaos, screaming, running footsteps, the gunman shouting something. More shots from the doorway. Security had finally arrived. More shouting, a body hitting the floor. Not his, the gunman. Daniel Reyes would never hurt anyone again. But all of that was distant, muffled, like listening to the world from underwater. What he felt clearly was hands on his chest, small hands pressing down on his shoulder with desperate strength. Vivian Hartwell's face swam into focus above him. Her perfect composure had shattered. Her hands were red with his blood, pressing hard against the wound. Her eyes were wide with something he had never seen in them before. Genuine fear. Not for herself, for him. "Stay with me," she was saying, her voice breaking. "Stay with me. What is your name? Tell me your name." Callum tried to speak, but his mouth filled with copper. He coughed, tasted blood. "Callum," he managed. "Callum Weston." "Callum." "Okay, Callum, look at me. Keep looking at me." She pressed harder on his shoulder. Someone threw her a jacket, and she wadded it against the wound. "Why did you do that?" "My daughter," Callum whispered. The boardroom was getting darker, the edges of his vision closing in like curtains. "Rosie. She is at St. Catherine's School. Someone needs to pick her up at 3. Please. Tell her I love her. You are going to tell her yourself," Vivian said fiercely. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through blood spatter. "Do you hear me? You are going to be fine. The ambulance is coming." Callum tried to smile. "Your boardroom. Sorry about the mess. I just cleaned it this morning." "Stop talking about the boardroom." Vivian was sobbing now. "Why? Why would you do that? You do not even know me." But Callum's eyes were closing. The darkness was warm, almost comfortable. He thought about Rosie, about Marisol, about the 3 years he had spent watching, learning, documenting. "I know you," he whispered. "I know everything." And then the darkness took him. The last thing he heard was Vivian Hartwell screaming for help, her voice raw and broken, begging a janitor not to die. The ambulance arrived 4 minutes later. Callum was unconscious by the time they loaded him onto the stretcher, his
You
vital
could have
signs
abandoned me,
crashing.
and why did you save
Vivian
me?
rode with
Because
him,
of my
still
daughter,
covered in his
and
blood,
because I promised to
refusing
live
to
by
leave
love,
despite the
not
paramedics'
hatred.
protests. Daniel Reyes had died on the boardroom floor. 2 shots from security. He was 45 years old, a widower, a father of 2. His wife Maria had died 5 years ago in an explosion at the Riverside plant. In Daniel's pocket, police found a list, 14 names, all executives and board members of Hartwell Industries. Vivian's name was circled in red. At the hospital, a detective approached Vivian with a folder. "Ms. Hartwell, we have identified the man who saved you. Callum Weston, 42 years old, employed as a janitor at your company for 3 years." The detective paused. His wife was Marisol Weston. She died in the Riverside plant explosion 5 years ago. She was one of the 43 victims. Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. "According to our records, Mr. Weston refused the settlement offer your company made to the victims' families. He would not sign the non-disclosure agreement." The detective leaned closer. "Ms. Hartwell, the man who saved your life had every reason to let you die. Every reason to want you dead. But he took a bullet for you instead. Vivian sat alone in the surgical waiting room, staring at her hands. Callum Weston's blood was still caked under her fingernails. Her designer suit was ruined. Her careful composure was shattered. And echoing in her mind over and over was a single devastating question. Why would he save me? The pediatric ward was painted in cheerful colors that felt obscene given the circumstances. Cartoon animals smiled from the walls. A television played some animated movie nobody was watching. And in room 314, a little girl with dark curls was crying and trying very hard to be brave. Vivian Hartwell stood outside the door for a long moment, still wearing her blood-stained suit, listening to the soft sobs coming from inside. Every instinct told her to run, to call someone else, to let professionals handle this. But she had promised a dying man she would check on his daughter. And for reasons she could not fully explain, that promise felt more important than anything else in her life. She knocked gently and pushed the door open. Rosie Weston was smaller than Vivian had expected. Thin, almost fragile. She wore hospital clothes and clutched a worn stuffed rabbit that had clearly been loved nearly to death. Her eyes, dark and serious, fixed on Vivian with desperate hope. Is my dad okay? Please, is he okay? They told me he got hurt saving someone important. Vivian crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, not caring that she was leaving bloody footprints on the linoleum. He is alive, sweetie. He is in surgery, but the doctor says he is going to be okay. Rosie burst into tears, clutching her rabbit. I was so scared. I thought he was going to leave me like Mom did. The words hit Vivian like a physical blow. Your dad is very strong, Vivian said softly. He saved my life today. He is always saving people. Rosie wiped her eyes fiercely. He works so hard. He is always tired, but he never complains. He makes me breakfast and walks me to school and reads to me every night, even when he can barely keep his eyes open. He is the best dad in the whole world. I believe you. Rosie studied her with those two old eyes, taking in the expensive suit, the blood, the exhaustion. Are you the person he saved? Yes, I am the CEO of Hartwell Industries. Something shifted in Rosie's expression. Recognition. And something darker. That is the company where my mom worked, before she died. The room suddenly felt very cold. My mom was Marisol Weston. She worked at your factory, the one that exploded. Rosie's voice was matter of fact, the way children speak about tragedies they have learned to live with. I was 3. I do not remember her much. Just that she smelled like lavender and used to sing to me. Vivian covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to sob. This child, this beautiful, fragile child. Her father had spent 3 years working in the building of the company that killed her mother. Rosie asked a question that cut straight to Vivian's heart. Are you really going to help my dad? Or are you just being nice because he saved you? The question was so direct, so painfully honest, that Vivian had to take a moment before answering.
Are you really helping my dad,
I am
or just
going to
because
help
he
him.
saved you?
And you, I promise,
will really
Rosie,
help.
I am
I will
going to
tell
make
the
things
truth
right.
and fix everything.
People always say that, but then they do not. I know. But I am going to keep my promise, no matter what it costs. Vivian left the hospital at midnight. She did not go home. She did not change her clothes. Instead, she told her driver to take her to the office. The Hartwell Industries headquarters at night was a tomb of metal and glass. Vivian's keycard opened every door. But she did not go to her penthouse office. She took the service elevator down to the basement, down to the archives, down to the place where corporations buried their sins. The archives were a labyrinth of filing cabinets and boxes, a physical repository of decisions and documents dating back 60 years. Everything was supposed to be digitized, but the reality was messier. There were always things that slipped through cracks, things people wanted to forget. Things like Riverside. Vivian started pulling files. Her manicured nails, still carrying traces of Callum's blood, tore through cardboard and paper. She worked methodically, using her executive access to bypass locked cabinets, searching for anything related to the factory explosion. At 2:14 in the morning, she found it. A banker's box mislabeled and filed under the wrong year. Inside were documents that should have been seen by regulators, safety audits that should have triggered immediate action, memos that should have sent people to prison. Vivian spread them across a dusty table, her heart hammering. The first memo was from Vincent Cross to her father, Edmund Hartwell, dated 6 months before the explosion. Edmund, the floor supervisors are raising concerns about the ventilation system in Building C. Chemical exposure levels are approaching OSHA limits. Engineering is requesting an immediate shutdown for retrofitting. Cost estimate for proper ventilation upgrade, $2.3 million. Cost for temporary filtration, $400,000. Cost for regulatory fines if caught, $150,000. Production shutdown would cost approximately $1.1 million per week in lost revenue. Recommendation: implement temporary measures, avoid the shutdown, manage the OSHA inspector schedule. Inspector Carver has been cooperative in the past. Your call. And below it, in her father's handwriting: approved, keep production running, handle the inspector. Vivian felt sick. Her hands shook as she pulled another document. An internal incident report from the day of the explosion. 43 dead, 17 injured. Preliminary assessment: catastrophic failure of ventilation system led to chemical vapor accumulation. Ignition source was electrical spark from aging wiring. System had been flagged for upgrade in March, but repairs were deferred for budget considerations. Clipped to it was a legal strategy document from Barrett Sinclair. Immediate settlement offers to all families. Fast, generous enough to prevent lawsuits, but with ND as attached. Full cooperation with initial investigation, but strategic management of information flow. Retirement of all internal documents showing prior knowledge of system issues. Total projected cost if they settled quietly, $38 million. Projected cost if negligence was proven, $200 million plus punitive damages and criminal liability. The memo ended with a chilling instruction. Vincent, sanitize all documentation related to the March safety requests. This does not leave this office. Vivian read it 3 times, hoping the words would change. They did not. Her father, the man who had taught her about business, about leadership, about legacy, he had knowingly allowed unsafe conditions to continue. And when people died, he had covered it up. She kept searching. And then she found something that made her blood run cold. More files, but these were different. Organized meticulously, photographed, annotated, cross-referenced with dates and names. Someone had been building a case, piece by piece, hiding it in plain sight within the archives themselves. The handwriting on the folder labels was neat, methodical, patient. It was Callum Weston's handwriting. For 3 years, the janitor had been building a revolution in the basement of his enemy's tower. He had access to every floor, every office, every filing cabinet. Nobody watches the janitor. Nobody thinks about what he might be hearing, seeing, recording. He could have destroyed her at any time. He could have taken this evidence to prosecutors, to journalists, to anyone who would listen. But when a bullet flew toward her chest, he had thrown himself in its path. Why? The question burned in Vivian's mind as dawn broke over the city. She went back to the hospital, found Callum awake, propped up in his bed, his shoulder heavily bandaged. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear, watching her as she entered. "Miss Hartwell." His voice was rough. "You survived because of you." Vivian approached the bed slowly. "I do not know how to thank you. You do not have to thank me. You took a bullet for me. You nearly died." Vivian pulled a chair close to the bed. "I met your daughter last night. Rosie. She is remarkable." Callum's expression cracked, emotion flooding through. "Is she okay?" "She is fine. Scared for you, but fine. I sat with her for a while." Vivian's throat tightened. She told me about her mother, about Marisol. The name hung in the air between them. Callum closed his eyes briefly. "So you know. I know Marisol worked at Riverside. I know she died in the explosion." Vivian's voice broke. "And I know my company killed her. My father. My board. They knew that plant was dangerous, and they did nothing. I found the documents last night." Callum opened his eyes, studying her face. "You did not know before?" "No, but that does not matter. Ignorance does not absolve me. I inherited an empire built on negligence, and I never questioned it. You were trusting your father." "My father was a murderer." Vivian leaned forward, her eyes searching his face. "But you knew everything. You had evidence that could destroy me. Why did you save me? Callum was quiet for a long moment. Because of Rosie, he finally said. Because of Marisol. Vivian waited. Marisol made me promise something before she died. She was lying in that hospital bed, her lungs filling with fluid from the chemicals. She was suffocating, and she knew she was dying. But her last words were not about revenge. Callum's voice roughened. She made me promise to raise Rosie with love, not hate. She said, do not let them take your heart too. He met Vivian's eyes, and I watched you. For 3 years I watched you work. You are tough, demanding, but you are not cruel. You are not like your father. I saw someone who might actually change things if she knew the truth. Vivian was crying now. But I walk past you every day. I never even saw you. Most people do not see janitors. That is not cruelty. That is just the world. Callum attempted a small smile. But now you see me, and you have a choice about what to do with what you have learned. What should I do? Tell the truth. All of it. Callum's voice was firm. Be better than what came before you. That is what Marisol would have wanted. That is why I gave you the chance. The boardroom battle happened the next morning. Vivian walked in carrying a banker's box full of evidence. Vincent Cross and Barrett Sinclair were already there, smug and confident, certain they could contain whatever damage the shooting had caused. They were wrong. Vivian set the box on the table with a heavy thud. 43 people died at Riverside, she said, her voice cutting through the room. And you covered it up. She pulled out the memos, the safety reports, the settlement strategy, document after document, spreading them across the polished table like evidence at a murder trial. Vincent's face went white, then red with rage. Where did you get those? From our own archives, where they have been sitting for 5 years. Barrett tried to intervene. Vivian, if this comes out, it will destroy the company. Criminal charges, civil suits, everything your father built. My father built this company on graves. Vivian's voice was ice. I do not want his legacy, you self-righteous child. Vincent stood, his chair scraping back. The board will never support this. Then I will go to the authorities alone. I will hand over every document. I will testify personally. This ends today. She turned to the security guards at the door. These men are suspended. Effective immediately. Remove them from the building. Vincent lunged toward her. Barrett grabbed his arm, pulling him back. This is not over, Barrett hissed. Vivian watched them being escorted out. Her legs were shaking, but her voice was steady. I am holding a press conference tomorrow. Full disclosure, the whole world is going to know what happened at Riverside. That night, Vivian went back to Rosie's hospital room. The little girl was sitting up in bed, still clutching her worn rabbit. She looked stronger than she had the day before. You came back, Rosie said. I promised I would. Rosie studied her for a moment. Then she asked something unexpected. Are you scared? About telling the truth? Very scared. I might lose everything. But you are doing it anyway. Because it is the right thing. And because your dad believes I can be better. Rosie was quiet. Then she reached under her pillow and pulled out her stuffed rabbit. This was my mom's, she said softly. Dad gave it to me after she died. He said as long as I had Mr. Bunny, part of Mom would always be with me. She held the rabbit out to Vivian. You can take him. For courage. Mr. Bunny helps when things are scary. Vivian took the worn stuffed animal with trembling hands. The fur was matted from years of love. One ear was slightly torn. It smelled faintly of lavender. Thank you, Rosie. I will take very good care of him. Rosie smiled. My mom always said everyone deserves a second chance to be better. I think you deserve that chance. Vivian held the rabbit to her chest and wept. The press conference was held in the main lobby of Hartwell Industries. Reporters packed the space, cameras everywhere, the air electric with anticipation. Everyone knew something big was coming. Vivian stood at the podium in a simple black suit. No jewelry, no makeup to hide the exhaustion on her face. In her pocket, hidden from view, was a worn stuffed rabbit named Mr. Bunny. 5 years ago, she began, her voice steady and clear, an explosion at the Riverside manufacturing plant killed 43 people and seriously injured 17 more. At the time, company leadership characterized this as a tragic accident. She paused. That characterization was a lie. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Vivian raised her hand for silence. The explosion was not an accident. It was the inevitable result of systematic negligence by company leadership, including my father, Edmund Hartwell, who was CEO at the time. 6 months before the explosion, safety concerns were raised. Engineering requested an immediate shutdown. Leadership chose not to shut down production. The cost of repairs was deemed too expensive. She held up one of the damning memos. This document, signed by my father, approved the decision that led to 43 deaths. I found it in our own archives, along with dozens of other documents, proving negligence in a coordinated cover-up. The silence in the room was absolute. Yesterday, I provided the district attorney's office with all documentation. I have offered full cooperation with criminal investigations. I have suspended executives who were complicit. Vivian looked directly into the cameras. And today, I am announcing that Hartwell Industries is establishing a $20 million restitution fund for Riverside families. No NDAs, no gag orders, a reporter shouted. Ms. Hartwell, this could bankrupt your company. Vivian's answer was simple. If this company can only exist by hiding its crimes, it does not deserve to exist. Another reporter. Why are you doing this? Vivian thought about Callum in his hospital bed, about Rosie offering her mother's rabbit for courage, because 2 days ago, a man threw himself in front of a bullet to save my life. His name is Callum Weston. His wife was one of the 43 people killed at Riverside. For 3 years, he worked in this building as a janitor, documenting evidence of our crimes. Her voice cracked with emotion. He had every reason to let me die, but he saved me anyway, because he believed that I could be better than my father. She gripped the podium. I owe him more than I can ever repay, but I can start by telling the truth. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Prosecutors presented the damning documents. They showed cost-benefit analyses that calculated the value of human lives in dollars. They called survivors to testify about conditions they had worked in, complaints they had filed, reassurances they had received that everything was safe. And they called Callum Weston. He took the stand on a warm afternoon in late spring. His shoulder had healed well. He wore a new suit and carried himself with quiet dignity. The prosecutor walked him through his story, his marriage to Marisol, her employment at Riverside, the complaints she had brought home about chemical smells. Mr. Weston, the prosecutor said, tell the jury what happened on September 3rd. Callum's voice was steady. I got a call at 2:17 in the afternoon. There had been an explosion at Riverside. My wife had been brought to the hospital. I drove there in 19 minutes. It felt like hours. What did you find? Chaos. People on gurneys and hallways. I found Marisol. She was conscious but struggling to breathe. Her lungs were damaged from chemical inhalation. Did you speak with her? Yes. She told me she loved me. Made me promise to take care of Rosie. Made me promise not to let what happened make me bitter. Callum's voice roughened. She died 4 hours later. She suffocated, and she was awake for most of it. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors wiped their eyes. What did you do after your wife's death? I tried to get answers. The company offered me $200,000 to sign an NDA. The lawyer told me Marisol had made mistakes that contributed to the explosion. I knew that was a lie. Marisol was meticulous about safety, so I refused the settlement. And when the investigation went nowhere, I got a job as a janitor at Hartwell Industries. I spent 3 years gathering evidence. The defense attorney tried to paint him as vengeful. Callum's response was devastating. If I wanted revenge, I would have let Ms. Hartwell die. Instead, I saved her life. Because my wife asked me to be better than my anger. Because I believed Ms. Hartwell could change things. That is not revenge. That is hope. The verdict came on a Tuesday afternoon. Vincent Cross was found guilty on all 43 counts of criminally negligent homicide. 25 years in prison. Barrett Sinclair was convicted of obstruction and conspiracy. 15 years. But the moment everyone remembered happened afterwards. Vincent Cross was being led through the lobby of Hartwell Industries on his way to a waiting police vehicle. He had to pass through the building one last time, past the employees he had once commanded. Employees lined the corridors, silent, watching. Vincent walked in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his silver hair disheveled. The arrogant confidence that had defined him was gone. A young woman from accounting spoke softly as he passed. My aunt worked at Riverside. Her lungs are ruined. She got $40,000 and had to stay silent for life. Another employee. My cousin's husband died in that explosion. They told us it was his fault. Near the end of the corridor, Vincent passed Vivian Hartwell. He stopped. His eyes blazed with hatred. You will regret this. You have destroyed everything. Vivian met his gaze without flinching. No, I am rebuilding it. The applause started somewhere in the back. Soft at first, then spreading. Not loud or triumphant. Just a quiet acknowledgement that justice had finally been served. Vincent Cross was led out into the sunlight, into the waiting police car, into the rest of his life behind bars. 6 months after the trial, Callum Weston stood in his new office on the 43rd floor of Hartwell Industries. The same floor where he had once pushed a mop at 5:47 every morning. The same windows he had cleaned while executives walked past without seeing him. Now his name was on the door. Director of Worker Safety and Compliance. Last week he had shut down a plant in Ohio. Workers reported strange chemical smells. The old leadership would have buried the complaint. Callum ordered an immediate shutdown. They found a leak that could have killed dozens. The board had supported him unanimously. His desk held 3 photographs. Marisol, laughing in the sunlight on their wedding day. Rosie, holding Mr. Bunny and grinning at the camera. And a new one, the 3 of them at a company picnic. Callum, Rosie, and Vivian, looking like something that might become a family. A knock at his door. Vivian entered, smiling. Ready for the meeting? Quarterly safety report. Callum nodded. The numbers are good. Accidents down 78%. Because of you. Because of us. They walked together toward the conference room, the same room where a bullet had changed everything. Rosie appeared at the end of the hallway. Her cheeks were pink with health. Her breathing was easy and clear. The treatments were working. The new apartment in a clean neighborhood had made a difference. Dad, she ran toward them. I came to pick you up for dinner. She looked at Vivian hopefully. You are coming too, right? Would not miss it. Rosie fell into step between them, reaching up to take both their hands. Can I ask you something? Of course, sweetie. You and my dad. You are friends now, right? Real friends? Not just because he saved you or you feel guilty? Vivian and Callum exchanged glances over Rosie's head. Yes, Vivian said softly. We are real friends. Real friends, Callum agreed. Rosie nodded, satisfied. Good. My mom always said the best friends are the ones who make you braver. Dad says you make him brave enough to try again, to believe good things can happen. And you say he makes you brave enough to tell the truth. She squeezed both their hands. So you are best friends. That is how it works. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. Your mom was very wise. She was. And she would be happy right now. Because we are all okay. That is what she wanted most. They walked out of the building together into the evening light. 1 year later, Callum stood alone in his office after hours, looking out at the city lights. So much had changed. Hartwell Industries had survived, leaner but stronger. The restitution fund had helped dozens of families. The safety protocols had become industry standard. Rosie was thriving. She had started a group at school to raise awareness about workplace safety. She told everyone her dad made sure nobody else lost their mom. And Vivian had become something unexpected, a partner, a confidant, someone who understood his grief because she carried her own burden. He had not planned to love again, had not thought it possible. But love did not ask permission. A soft knock at the door. Vivian entered, looking tired but peaceful. Rosie sent me. She says dinner is getting cold and you promised 2 chapters tonight. Callum smiled. She drives a hard bargain. She gets that from her father. They stood together at the window. I was thinking about Marisol today, Callum said quietly, about what she would think of all this. What do you think she would say? He considered. That grief does not have to be the end. That second chances are real. That love is not finite. He turned to face her. I think she would say, I deserve to be happy. That Rosie deserves a family. He took her hand. I say thank you. For seeing me. For building something worth believing in. For being brave. Vivian squeezed his hand. Thank you for saving my life. In more ways than one. They walked out together into the life they were creating. Some ghosts choose their hauntings. Callum Weston had chosen his 3 years ago, walking into the building of the company that destroyed his world. But ghosts can also choose to step into the light. And when they do, they can bring others with them. Callum had saved Vivian's life with a split-second decision. But Vivian had saved his life too. She had given him purpose beyond grief, a chance to transform pain into protection. And Rosie, the little girl who had lost her mother but never lost her hope, had taught them both that forgiveness was not weakness. It was the bravest choice of all. Marisol Weston had believed everyone deserved a second chance. Her husband had proven her right, and somewhere Callum was certain she was smiling.
The story above leaves a very clear lesson. Kindness and courage can break down an entire system of wrongdoing. The protagonist is an ordinary janitor, but he did not choose hatred despite losing a loved one due to the irresponsibility of the company. He chose to act correctly in the decisive moment, not for gratitude, but because of a promise to his family and for his daughter's future. The story also reminds us that power is not a privilege to conceal mistakes, but a responsibility to face the truth and rectify the consequences. When a leader dares to admit their mistakes, dares to publicly acknowledge them and compensate, it is not weakness, but courage. Ultimately, justice does not come from hatred, but from truth and genuine change.